So this video will be my build for Jane Foster's The Mighty Thor. If you enjoyed this video today, feel free to like and subscribe for future Marvel content. So the main focal point of this build is going to be a battery effect from the signature attack this time. So it's actually similar to my Captain America build, except Captain America does a battery from the light combo finisher. I don't know if Cap's going to be out before this video or what, but I digress. So the main stats I want to focus on are the melee stat and the heroic stat, right? So starting with the melee piece, at its triple stat, might, valor, precision. The main thing you want to focus on for this build, the way I went for it, is might and valor, though. And then we have light combo finishers and signature attacks deal vibranium. So that's where the battery effect is going to take place. And then the sonic conduit melee attack impacts are increased by 25%. That's not going to really mean anything. Like I said, the way I went about it is you just want to make sure you have signature attacks dealing vibranium damage. With the ranged piece, it is a double stat, and it focuses more on might than anything else, but that's fine. It could have been better if it was might and valor, but it's not that big of a deal. But this does 15% increased damage from Warrior's Fury, which is a very big bonus. And then ranged power attacks deal vibranium, not that big of a deal because we want to focus on the signature attacks. And then 20% chance a melee critical attack grants a damage buff. So that is a very good perk to have as well, the faultless buff. With that being said as well, I forgot to say, both of these pieces you have a chance of getting from the elite raid. So these are both discordant sound elite pieces. Now, at this point, you might be asking, well, battery effect, you need two opposite effects acting at the same time. So if this is vibranium and this is vibranium, then where is the battery effect coming into play, right? So the battery effect is actually coming into play in her inherent shock ability, right? So the defensive piece I have is actually you can get from the Cosmic Threat event, or you can get from the Cosmic Threat villain sector where you fight Monica, and it's in the Snowy Tundra, I believe. So the main perk that I wanted for this, obviously the Valor and Might are just like the perfect stats that you want for it, right? But the main perk that I wanted for this is that increases the shock status fill rate and any shock damage dealt by 20%. So basically the point of this is that she and Thor have an inherent shock built into their kit. They can deal shock damage naturally using their intrinsic. So what you do is while you're attacking, while you're doing your signature attack, you hold R2 for your intrinsic and you're applying vibranium and shock. So once the shock status is fully procced, when you do the signature attack again with the vibranium, that is where you get your battery effect from. So you do it mixing the inherent shock along with the vibranium, and it's really, really godly the way it works out, in my opinion. She's really good with this. So like I said, the main thing is the shock perk right here, Valor and Might stats if you can, and you can get this from either the Cosmic Threat event that goes on or the Cosmic Threat villain sector that it resets. So I mean, you can do it anytime you want, but the actual mission chain for the Cosmic Threat villain sector resets weekly and stuff like that. So then the heroic piece, I mean, it's self-explanatory. The 15% increased damage from Warrior's Fury, if you can get that, that's awesome. The heroic recharge rate, in my opinion, was just another bonus. This is an elite piece of gear again, so you get this from the elite raid. And the main thing that I wanted to on this piece was the 15% increased damage from Warrior's Fury, and then you just want to make sure it has Might and Valor on it as well. And I say this with all my characters, don't be afraid to have some resilience on here and get their defense up. So my defensive stat is 1879. That is not bad as well at all. I consider that to be pretty good, excuse me, especially after the comic book nerf that happened way back like months ago and stuff like that. So now we'll move on to the minor artifacts. So the minor artifacts should be kind of semi-self-explanatory. So you do want triple val. I'm just noticing right now that this has 52, 64, 64 valor on it. I don't know why that's the case. It should be triple 64. I've never seen that before. Comment down below if you've had something similar happen to you. I don't think it should be triple 64 when they're at max level like that. So I'm not entirely sure why it's not. Not that big of a deal, but I digress anyway. When it comes to a Valor ISO, you want to have the Tripper Valor on it to increase your heroic stat as much as possible. This mainly scales with Valor. It also scales with proficiency as well. Same thing with Might as well. I mean the melee rating. It scales with might, valor, and proficiency, if I can speak, as well. And like as you can see, you can just hover all these over these to see exactly what scales with what and stuff like that. So the way I did it to make it more comfortable is I have this ISO with triple valor, and then I have this ISO which does melee critical attacks have a chance of activating a vibranium payload, so you can get the battery effect off way easier and way faster. So this you can get actually from either the raid, the elite raid, or the corrupted vibranium event whenever it comes back around. And a triple valor ISO you have a chance of getting basically anywhere, especially from golden chests. Primarily your best place to look for it is from the faction vendors, either the Inhuman or the Shield faction vendor. They have minor epic artifacts in their daily that reset and change out, so make sure to check those daily. And then if you if you want to be like kind of less comfortable, you could put another Valor ISO on there, and you get the 19,000 heroic stat now with the 3,900 melee stat. You get less defense, but this will cause you to do more damage, and it might be better for a boss type of build, like if you just want to switch and put that on for a boss. But as far as crowds go and stuff like that, having this minor artifact on is a lot more comfortable. As far as the major artifact goes, I always preach the Nornstone of Lethal Will, just because it just grants the damage buff. It's the most useful. You could do Tachyon, the Tactagon, which, you know, gives you a small stat boost, but I don't find it as worth it. I much rather like to activate the damage buff that comes from the Nornstone of Lethal Will. So with that being said, now we can move on to the skills. Alright, so now as far as the skills go, so for the support heroic, I have nearby teammates receive a temporary damage boost of 25% when Warrior's Fury is active. The second one, I have increases critical attack damage by 25% and critical attack chance by 10% of anyone affected by Warrior's Fury. This one is the more important one. This one I feel like doesn't matter as much, but that's the one I prefer. I also prefer this God Blast one, so Whirlwind inflicts 20% more damage and applies cryo damage to targets caught in the swirling vortexes. This is really just preference for that one as well as this one. Defeating enemies with God Blast refunds 5% of the assault heroic energy. That's just preference in my opinion. This increases the damage of Mjolnir by 20% and the speed at which Mjolnir seeks out and hits targets when you activate the ultimate. And then dealing damage with Unyarn builds up the overcharge meter 25% faster. Again, that's really just preference. I do think this is more of a necessity with Unyarn, but other than that, I still think it is pretty much personal preference. Same thing for this for the most part. So for this, increase the impact on signature attacks, making them more likely to interrupt targets. I definitely think you should. Increases damage from combo finishers by 15%. That's kind of your preference at that point. I think it's better for that. Takedowns grant a heroic orb. That's your preference. Increases the targeting range on hammer recalls to ensure that it always hits a target when recall. For this build, that's your preference. Increases hammer throw and recall speed by 15%. That's your preference. Increases the damage of beam of star fire by 15%. That's your preference. As you can see for most of these, that's going to be the case. But for this one actually specifically, I think it is still your preference, but I think this one works a little bit better for this build. So dealing damage while Allmother's Blessing is active will recover 1.2% willpower per hit. I think that's a little more viable for this build. On the other hand, I do think Ionic Bolts is pretty good as well, but I preferred this one Force of Will more than that. So, Surging Force increases the automatic regeneration speed of intrinsic Allmother's Blessing energy by 12%. That's your preference. Hold X while flying to be faster. That's your preference. Increases the damage of all thrown weapon attacks by 10% and damage of shockwaves by 15% during God's Tempest. That's your preference. Triggering God Tempest instantly refills the intrinsic meter and increases intrinsic regeneration by 25%. That's your preference. This, I feel like, is more of a necessity. Melee attack damage is increased by 15% while God Tempest is active. And if you don't know, so Allmother's Blessing back here, Allmother's Blessing is your inherent intrinsic, I believe, and God Tempest is your overcharge. So yeah, dealing melee attacks damage built up the overcharge meter, filling the meter unleashes a shockwave. Yeah, so God Tempest should be your overcharge, and then the Allmother's Blessing is the inherent R2 intrinsic. So this is a necessity more than others. So the melee attack damage increased by 15%, and then this is your preference, but I highly suggest for this type of build. You go with it with this. First, now for champion, it's kind of funny because I kind of went against my own rules that I'm sure I'm going to talk about in other videos, but I normally would say get these 2 columns and then actually get this column, but I've barely done it. In fact, I'm going to do this a little bit right now for Jane Foster because I had a couple of points. But ignore this right here. I honestly don't know what I was thinking. It's not this column is not bad, but you definitely should just go for this column before this column. And these 2 columns, in my opinion, should come first. It should go 1, and then this column is 2. And then this column is 3. And then after that, in my opinion, anything is your preference. So as far as the last row goes, you know, you need 16 points to get the last row. So if you can at least get them to 4, I would call it good. So I would get this to 4, and then I would get this to 4, and then I would get this to 4. So these 2 increase your defense. So that's just honestly my personal opinion. You can never get enough defense. And then this increases your critical attack damage. So I would get, like I said, those 3 to 4. And then this one is pretty good to get to 4 after that. And then maybe the heroic damage as well. But the first 3 that I mentioned are the ones that matter the most. So that's how I would build your champion level. So comment down below with how you might build your Jane Foster. And if you enjoyed this video today, feel free to like and subscribe if future Marvel content. I'll end this video with gameplay for Jane Foster at power level 175, and I appreciate you for watching the video.
Time to get to work. I am the mighty Thor. You're finished. Yield to me.
Avengers. You won't survive.
Avengers fan. The shield, the hammer. Gonna guess you've got some rockets hiding back there?
Kate, AIM has control of the bridge. We can't open it again unless we get it back.